Welcome to the Sales Queen podcast, where we teach women how to turn their skills into sales and monetize their message so they can finally sell with the clarity, confidence, and certainty that they've always wanted to. No longer does the game of sales need to be an old boys club. It's time for you to sell like a queen. Well, welcome everybody to the Sales Queen podcast. I'm your host, Megan Rhodes, and today I am honored to have Robert Posey here with me, the founder of RemoteRep.com, a sales genius, and I am so personally excited to learn from him today for all the different things that he's been through and where he has gotten to where he is today, which is very impressive, and I'm pumped for y'all to hear about it. So Robert, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Of course. Feeling is mutual. I'm honored to be here as well in the short, I guess, period that we've known each other. I meet so many salespeople, and you can read into who's got it and who doesn't. And I guess I'm honored to be here with another sales professional. So
awesome. Well, we love to start the show with asking everybody kind of their origin story. You and I were chatting before. There's so much that you've accomplished in your life and many different iterations of seasons of things that you've done. So I'd love to just first turn it over to you wherever you want to start. There's no place, nothing off limits. And why don't you kind of share a little bit about where you came from and how you got to where you are today?
Oh my gosh, it's such a story. It's such a story. All right. Well, if we're going to serve everybody to the best of our ability, then I'm gonna go way back. I guess it really starts, I would say, in elementary school. And the reason I'm starting there is I was a kid with ADD, ADHD. I had a natural inclination towards trouble. So I wasn't out being the worst kid on the planet, but I was talking too much. I was constantly out of my seat. Later that translated, I think there was some, I guess, I don't want to call it trauma necessarily, but maybe if I were looking at it now from 35, it's different degrees of trauma, whether it's very, very small or even some more significant. But it started with this kid who doesn't pay attention, he doesn't listen, getting called to the principal's office and having them talk to my parents in front of me about, Robert's this, Robert's that. And I guess I didn't know then, of course, being a child, I didn't know the impact that could have on me. So that's where the story started. Hit middle school, kind of the same thing, only now started hitting puberty, getting that kind of prepubescent attitude. I developed what they referred to lovingly or not so lovingly as a problem with authority. So, right?
Been there.
So I also, I don't know, school came naturally, or rather I was an auditory learner, still am, and I could hear the teacher and pick up on whatever needed to be picked up on in order to get the right answers without having to have eye contact. And unfortunately, that was like, Robert, you need to pay attention. And it's like, I am paying attention.
Yeah.
To the point where teachers would be like, well, what did I just say? And I would tell them what they just said. And now I'm a jerk, right? So I ended up butting heads with teachers pretty hard. What came of that, because I was being singled out a lot, and please understand, I know, looking back, I could have probably done a better job. I realized that I was probably disruptive, that I was taking away. I understand what they were trying to convey. I also understand that they could have done a better job on their side too, as educators, and me being a child. So yeah, that's part of my passion now, is how do we slow down? I'm constantly looking in, having 4 kids myself. I am in a lot of ways just like my parents. And I guess some of that's genetic, and some of that is being in the business owner's seat and having big goals and big missions. And sometimes it's very hard to slow down and differentiate between business and family, and they're finding that gap, or compartmentalizing the two, if that's the way you want to go about it, and or merging the two so that everybody's involved. So middle school, I ended up becoming a class clown. That's, if you're going to single me out, then I'm going to lean into it, and I'm going to start clowning around. That was it just happened. Like, that's just, I guess, what my defense mechanism became. And if you tell me I have a problem with authority, then I guess I have a problem with authority. So high school comes along, and that really continued. I ended up going to 6 different high schools because we lived in the same place. This wasn't a, dad's in the army thing. This was I was disruptive and a class clown, and apparently to a point where they felt the need to ask me to leave. Never expelled, just asked not to come back. So of course that translates to more and more and more, sort of this self-fulfilling prophecy. So let's see, how deep do we want to go? I guess my first steps into sales, like a lot of sales people you'll meet, I started selling weed. I was selling pot, and I wasn't really any good at it because I also was smoking pot.
I love it.
So I don't know. I always had an entrepreneurial side to me. At 15, I decided, let's go legit. My grandfather gave me a pressure washer, and then the guy that I worked for, I ended up having my first job at 15. I was a custom cabinet maker. He gave me a pressure washer, and I launched this pressure washing company called Low Country Pressure Washing. Grew up in South Carolina. Lots of green mold growing on sides of houses, kind of a tropical environment. I promptly sold $714 worth of pressure washing jobs. I bought a wakeboard and I bought some weed, and I ran out of money to buy chemicals. And that was the beginning and the end of my very first business. So back
A raging
to
success.
raging success.
Raging, wow.
Well, the thing was, like, I mean, you could say I grew up sort of, well, no questions. I grew up very, very privileged. I grew up in a very affluent part of South Carolina. And my parents, they did a lot of good things for me, and they did a lot of bad things for me in hindsight, in retrospect. So I say that with love, if mom and dad are watching. But
Yeah.
In that regard, their very good lesson there was, like, you got the pressure washing machines. And at the time, my mom paid an attorney to get me an LLC. I didn't know you could just go to the Secretary of State and register an LLC, and like it takes 5 minutes. So we ended up paying $1,000 for this LLC and to get registered, and got some insurance. So that was the gift my mom helped me with, and then said, if you want it to work, you need to make it work. So no more money, figure it out. Well, because I spent all my money, I was out, and that was it. I didn't know anything about sales. I didn't know anything about anything. So 17 comes along, and at this point, like, I don't know if I've conveyed how impactful or how big of a troublemaker I had started to lean into, but I was really running amok. And going from school to school to school, I made friends as quickly as I could, which I think that is a big piece of why I'm good at sales.
Yep.
Having to adapt to different environments. Well, unfortunately, the easiest people to get to know to, as a guy who was involved in marijuana, were other people involved in selling and smoking weed. So I naturally gravitated towards the troublemakers. And like, it's almost, there's probably still some shame and some guilt around this story looking back at it, but I'm going to give it to you anyways. So what had happened was I got in my, I went to the sixth school, the last one. I ended up having to finish through homeschooling, but at the last school, the group that I gravitated towards, they weren't just involved in selling weed and stuff like that, which, you know, it's legal through most of the country now. Like, arguably, it wasn't the biggest deal. It was because it was legal then, but I digress. They were also into like petty crime and apparently some larger crimes. So I wanted to fit in. I had what do they call it? Codependency.
Yeah.
And I felt the need to try to make them like me. So I ended up committing second-degree burglary and grand larceny with a group of kids that I didn't have any business hanging out with. Like, looking back at it, there was nothing good about that. I just didn't know any better. And I didn't know who I could go to for an open and honest conversation.
Mm.
So I just went to the people that seemed to like me. Only they liked me for the wrong reasons. And I guess I liked them for the wrong reasons as well. Well, on the evening of that event, I got into a car accident. If you want the details of the story, basically, we stole a couple of laptops, some digital cameras. There was a real estate office and a restaurant that were attached. So we stole some liquor from the restaurant, and we stole some cameras and this other stuff. Well, we had to take that and drive it off of this small island and drop off the loot, right? So then I had to drive back by myself. The phenomenal part of this story is I stole my sister's car because I thought that would get me in less trouble. They wouldn't know if I took her car. Well, I wrecked it. I totaled it on my way home. I was sober, no drinking, no drugs, no nothing. I was sober, but had what's called adrenal fatigue. If you've ever been through a really adrenaline impacting moment or whatever, you're very, very tired afterwards. So turn the AC on, turn the music up, fell asleep anyways. I woke up with the car in the grass, and they said there was no skid marks, no nothing, but I tried to push the pedal. I remember that distinctly. Apparently I hit the gas and drove straight into a tree. So now I have a scar from my sternum to past my belly button where I had burst my spleen. So called my mom, like, there's no getting out of this. I'm in trouble. I knew I was. And the weird part is, and my first grade teacher still says this today, I still have contact with her. No matter if I got in trouble, if you asked me if I did it, I was always honest. So I called my mom. Mom, I said I fucked up. Excuse my language. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss on here or not.
It's
but
fine.
So I said, Mom, I fucked up. And she's like, why aren't you in your room? And I was like, I stole Sarah's car and I wrecked it. And she was like, where are you? I told her where I was at, and I was less than, I don't know, 2 miles from the house. So first responder shows up. She tells me, like, hang up, call 911. I'll be there as quick as I can. So first responder shows up and he's telling me, you have got to sit in this car. If you've ever been in a car after an accident where the airbags have gone off, it smells very chemically and it's not good. There was a light rain. I didn't want to be in the car. So he's like, fine, just sit on the bumper. And of course, that problem with authority was coming out. I was in pain. There wasn't any marks on me visibly. But it's 3 a.m. You're a teenager. You have no business being out here. You must be drinking or doing some kind of drugs to have wrecked your car. So he asked me, he's like, you've been doing any kind of extracurriculars? I said, no, sir. And he's like, all right, okay. And you could tell he didn't believe me. My mom shows up, and then shortly after her, my dad showed up, and he's standing there talking to my parents. This is a similar situation I've been in the past. I'm standing to the side listening, and he tells my parents he needs to go home and sleep it off. I think he's been doing some kind of extracurriculars.
Mm.
My dad looks at me and he says, son, have you been drinking? I said, no, sir. He said, have you been doing drugs? I said, no, sir. And he looked at my mom and said, take him to the hospital. They refused to take me in the ambulance because apparently I was a troublemaker. If I had
Mm.
have gone home, I would have been dead in 2 hours. So when we got to the hospital, I passed out on the floor just slowly. I remember seeing it, laying down, looking at the linoleum, thinking like, it looks cool. It looks like relaxing. So I laid down, I went to sleep. I woke up to jelly on my stomach for an ultrasound. They found that I had no more spleen and there was a lot of blood. So
Yeah.
they shipped me to Charleston. I'll never forget my mom like reaching her hand toward the back of the ambulance, and I'm in there and they're like pushing me onto this stretcher and they closed the doors. And I didn't know if I was going to see her again. But like passed out immediately as soon as we get in there. Started convulsing. What ends up happening is if you're bleeding, there's a convulsion that can happen. And they say it's bad enough that you can snap your own clavicle if you're not careful, like if you're not restrained. And I remember like coming up and I remember an extreme amount of pain through here. And they started to strap me down and I was yelling like, please don't strap me down. Please don't strap me down. Passed out again, end up in Charleston. And it was lights and people and like a movie scene, except for I'm the guy on the stretcher. Well, turns out that the spleen was burst. I saw bright lights and I remember thinking like, wow, I've heard stories of this, like where you see the bright lights. And there was this beautiful lady standing next to me. And I remember asking her, am I going to be okay? And she's like, she wouldn't answer me. And I squeezed her hand. And I was like, am I going to be okay? And she said, you're going to be fine. And then I passed out and I woke up without a spleen. I ended up having to turn myself into the police. There was a police officer at my house when I got home. I ended up having to go to jail. They allowed me, because I turned myself in, they allowed me to really serve time with an injury back home. I ended up with like a really, really, really amazing attorney, and he made me cover and pay for everything. Like it was not your parents are going to pay your way out of this type situation. Well, that was the night that I found integrity. And I say, oh, I give you that entire story because it truly, truly shaped everything beyond that. I saw my mom on the way to a follow-up appointment. Well, I guess the reality of the story is I lied to the police officer the first time because I knew he didn't have any evidence, but my mom knew I was lying. So she would not look me in my eyes. When we were on our way to that second appointment, I looked at her, I tried to, and she wouldn't speak to me. And I said, Mom. And she's like, what, son? And I said, I did it. She said, you did what? I said, it was me. And she said, I know it was you. I said, what do I do? She said, call the police officer, tell him what you did. So that's what I did. I turned myself in, I confessed the whole thing to this guy. And I realized that the shame that my mom had looking me in the eyes, the way that I felt, I didn't want to feel that again. So that's where that is the root of why ethics and morals in sales is so important to me. So we'll fast forward. I ended up in sales, moved myself back to Georgia after a 30-second long conversation with a stranger. So if there's anybody who's like heard any advice or gotten any weird feelings about a conversation, that intuition, sometimes it works out. So pay attention to it, use a little bit of logic there, but follow your gut. So this guy in a red Ferrari pulls up outside of this marina I was standing in front of in South Carolina. This is in and amongst this other story. And he's like, he's like, well, he walked around his car and I asked him, I said, hey man, how do I get a car like that? And he's like, you got
Wow.
to move away from here. And I was like, what do you mean, like move away from here? Everybody here has money. He said, no, these are retired people. He said they have two purposes. They want to live long enough, or they want to have enough money and live long enough to use it. And then when they die, have enough left over that they can give it to their kids. And it was like, okay, so what do I do when I move? He said, figure out how to get your hand in on as many transactions as you can. And then he walked away. That was the whole conversation. So I uprooted at 18. I moved myself to Atlanta where I had family. And I walked in to get a $7.50 job as a front desk manager for Gold's Gym. Front desk manager, big word there.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up in sales accidentally. I was spinning in an office chair. It was the middle of the day. Nobody's in the gym in the middle of the day. And I thought I was alone and I was just bored. So I wasn't. The manager and the owner, they were having a meeting in the back office. And I hear this whistle. I'm literally mid spin. And this whistle comes and the boss is like, he's like, Robert, get back here. And they were watching me on the security footage. And he said, he's like, dude, you got too much energy. You need to like stay behind the desk. And if you can't, I have to fire you.
Hmm.
And I was like, please don't fire me. He's like, well, why don't we find somewhere else to use your energy? And I was like, tell me what that means. He's like, you ever sold anything? No. I wasn't going to tell him like, yeah, I sold $700 of pressure washing and a bunch of weed. Like that just didn't seem like a good story to tell the boss. So they put me in sales. I was given a presentation binder and the next walk-in. And I remember like my hand was shaking, like terrified. So in either case, that was my entrance into sales. So where do you want me to take this story now? Because it can go in a few different directions.
Yeah. I want to know when you had a transference of like, maybe I could be something. Because now, you had a previous identity that was constantly being told you were a troublemaker, and those words really informed how you acted. So then you
Yeah.
had this moment of integrity. Then you were given opportunity. Like, where was the shift in you where you were like, this is worth it for me to try to be good at this? And then ultimately you were.
Well, I think that the truth of the matter, there's two. I think there's two really pivotal moments here. Or there's so many. Like I call them pivotal moments. But all right, so got into sales, struggled. We had 7 gyms in our branch, and we were Gold's Gym, so we're a national franchise.
Mm-hmm.
So, or an international franchise. So I struggled for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, somewhere in there. Like barely, I was dead last out of all of our locations.
Hmm.
And I it's so weird how this comes back. So I still was smoking weed, and this long-haired hippie dude comes walking through the gym, and I connected with him over weed. But turns out he is a graphic designer, he's a copywriter, he's like this early stage guru type,
Wow.
and we hit it off. His name's Ori Bingal, and he would have no problems with me sharing that about how we met. So we started talking. I really didn't know anything about marketing, but I asked him, hey man, I want to make a brochure. And he's like, well, what is it supposed to say? Who's going to see it? Like, what's the purpose of it? Is there a call to action on the brochure? What's this brochure going to do? And I was like, I don't know, man. Like, I just want a brochure. And he's like, all right, well, tell me what your idea is. So I did, and he liked the idea. He's like, you've got a pretty good mind for this naturally. Why don't you come to this event with me?
Hmm.
So I go to Matt Basak's Marketing Madness or Marketing Mayhem, whatever it was, in 2008. And he tells me, like, this is going to be a pitch fest. There's going to be a ton of sales happening here. So I want you to watch the sales. forget all the marketing, watch the sales. And I went in with that intention. I paid attention to all the marketing and didn't listen to any of the sales.
Perfect.
So I was sold like, I'm going to be a marketer. Like, holy cow, these marketers are the rock stars of the business world. Those are the ones who control everything. Well,
Yeah.
it's not true. Like, there's a relationship between marketing and sales and fulfillment where none of them work without the other. I didn't know that then, but I knew I wanted to be this marketing rock star. So we get done and I asked him to mentor me. I just straight up asked him, it's like, I'm sold. I want to do this, whatever it takes. Please mentor me. And he's like, you make money in sales. You're going to start there. And I was like, okay, what do I do? So he gives me an audiobook. It was a Chet Holmes audiobook. And he said, listen to this 3 times. And then he said, implement everything you learn without question. And I was like, done, I'll do it. So I did. I listened to it 3 times in a row, and I started to implement. I took notes on anything that was actionable. I implemented it. 30 days later, I took the #1 sales spot in all of our Metro Atlanta locations. Like, what a giant jump from being dead last, 30 days with 1 audiobook, and now I'm #1. It clicked for me then that mentors, like, don't like, if you're gonna try to shortcut the process, you need somebody who's already done it. You have to have somebody who's already done it. And then relentless implementation. Like, it doesn't matter if you feel like it's awkward, if it's icky, if it makes you uncomfortable, like, as long as you're doing something that's ethical, implement, follow the instructions. So become very, very coachable. So that was the first moment where I gained some traction. The problem was, and this is something that I teach people now, you cannot, it's literally one of the reasons remote rep exists. You cannot stay stagnant. If you don't know what your goals are, if you don't have any idea or inclination of where you're going, then how do you know you're in the right place? So you have to look at the 5-year, 10-year, I mean, perhaps 30-year plan. What do you actually want your life to look like? And you need to reverse engineer that all the way back to today where you are. So at the time, I was selling gym memberships. These were like, $100 down and then $35 a month. Imagine how big the commission is on a deal of that size.
Huge, obviously.
Massive commission. I mean,
Millionaire.
life-changing. I was #1 in those locations and making less than $40,000 a year.
Wow.
It was the wrong vehicle.
Yeah.
So to tie that together to anybody who's listening, if you're not making the money that you want to be making right now, then you have to do something different.
Yep.
And if your skill set won't allow for it, then you need to be working on the skill set that will allow for it. Odds are, if you're in marketing and sales, you're probably in the right trajectory. But still, if the money's not working and it's not giving you the thing that you want, you have to do something different to get there. So yeah, that was the first big moment. The second big moment is there was a confusion, right? I told you I went in and listened to all of the marketing, and then I went and learned sales. So through all of this, I became very good at sales, moved into personal training, ended up managing salespeople and developing personal training departments. In the background, I was learning to build websites, learning to sell websites, learned about Facebook ads, learned about SEO. I was doing everything that wasn't sales. But I was making my money in sales because I had a stigma in my head that sales was used car salesman, snake oil salesman, this sleazy, I don't know, like just there was a stigma. There probably still is a stigma. I just don't hear it or pay attention to it anymore. So in comes Gulliver Giles. If you don't know who Gulliver Giles is, a lot of the high ticket coaches of the world today or sales trainers of the world today, Gulliver's the guy who trained them. And he lives in Australia. He's got, he and his wife have a business, and they kind of run things low key. Like, you would need to go and seek them out. And you would, even to this day, it would be a very wise decision. That said, I come into it kind of teetering between, am I a marketer? Am I sales? A mentor of mine told me, you got to go train with him. And at the time I was down to, like, remember, I'm not making a ton of money right now. I'm spread thin. I'm all over the place. So Gulliver says, he's like, yeah, man, well, I'm based in Australia. He's like, but, we're coming to the United States soon. Why don't you save your money? Let's do some training in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I told him,
That's so good.
I was
That's so good.
I told him, if you come to the United States, call me. You have my word, I'm coming.
Yeah.
Well, at this point, I had my first child, my daughter. I was, I don't think I was married yet. Yeah, I don't think I was married yet. So Gulliver calls me. And at the time, I had very little money coming in. I had, like, I'm going to do this website thing. So I stopped the gym membership sales. I went in all in on websites. It didn't work. Then I was right back into the gyms, trying to figure that stuff out. So Gulliver calls me at that time, and I didn't have the money to pay my bills. So I had taken out a credit card, and it was still in the envelope. I had not opened it yet. I got it to pay bills. And Gulliver calls.
Wow.
And he's like, Robert, what's going on, mate? And I'm like, hey, I gave this dude my word. I know I'm gonna have to pay for something.
Wow.
There was $7,500 on this credit card. That was the limit that I had. And I think his program was like 3K or 2,700 or something. It was a 3-day in-person event in Scottsdale. So I paid for that. I paid for my flight. I paid for my hotel. And then I had like a few $100s on the card left over that I was going to be able to feed myself when I was there.
Wow.
Like, I was terrified, like one of those, oh shit, I hope wifey doesn't find out. Like, but I also had some kind of dumb faith in myself. Like, I know I can get it done.
Yeah.
So
totally.
I went, and that was the event where I found out that sales is not sleazy. It doesn't have to be sleazy. From studying every persuasion book in the world, all of the manipulation and dark arts of sales, and anything that I could do to have a level up above the person I was talking to, that's what I had studied prior to. And all of it was phenomenal training. I recommend you study that stuff, but you have to have the hat on that I'm here to sell from a good place.
Yeah.
So when I met Gulliver, he kind of opened my eyes that sales is about two things: love and respect. Sales is about love and respect. It's about loving your customer enough that you listen to them, that you show up with intent. It's about loving them enough that you hold them accountable for the things that they say that they want. It's about having enough respect, both for them and for yourself, that if they're telling you something, if there's some cognitive bias that shows up on the call, or there's some sort of they're telling themselves a lie, whether they realize it or not, whether they're telling you a lie, your job is to be able to hold space for them, to ask them the right questions, for them to come to the conclusion on their own that they're not behaving in a way, or that what they're doing currently is not getting them the result that they need, and that they have to make a change if they actually want the result that they want. That's what I learned from Gulliver in that 3 days. I also fell in love with all of the other, there were 40 people in the room. and I got to hear about all these different opportunities. There was a lady who's taught food truck owners how to grow their food truck business. There was a guy there that he closed $1 million deal on the phone sitting next
Wow.
to me. And he was in e-com optimization. He was doing copywriting and website conversion optimization. So I saw so much opportunity, and I asked Gulliver to get me a job, put me in high ticket. I want to close deals like this because I wanted deep, meaningful conversations. I wanted to actually have the opportunity to change people's lives during those conversations.
Yeah.
So that's how I got my first high ticket role.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love what you said about meaningful conversations. I have a lot of people who will come to me on strategy calls, and they're currently in corporate America and they're doing, high ticket, let's say healthcare sales, or they're doing pharmaceuticals or things like that. I don't know if you have any experience training. Well, you have tons of experience training people probably who came from that world as well. What would you say is the biggest difference that you've seen when people kind of come over to our world? Is that something that you hear them saying a lot as well too? Because I know I've even heard that, like, man, this is great. But I know from the female perspective, I hear every day, like, man, I've lost the frame before I even step in because this person has a bias just about me even being here. It's some old doctor, or whatever. But what have you found that is the biggest difference between what we do in high ticket sales, kind of the online marketing world, and then corporate sales, if maybe somebody's listening to this and they have no experience in our world yet?
So, well, I want to get some clarity on the conversation because you actually touched on a couple different things there. You
Yeah.
talked about the frame, you being a female and somebody from corporate coming in, like it feels like you're going down the bulldozer rabbit
Yeah.
hole there. Somebody comes in thinking like don't try your sales shit on me.
Yep.
Right. So that's one sort of conversation. It sounds like the other question you asked there was in regards to somebody who's leaving corporate and wants to join this world.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think my favorite one of those two is the guy who tries to bulldoze you, because that's something super powerful. And well, we can go right back to Gulliver, that event. So when I went out there, my dad, my biological father, we love each other very much, but he's very harsh and he is naturally pessimistic, and he makes sure, and I know now he's trying to protect me, but he is sharp in tone. Like if you don't jump when he says jump, the next time he asks you, like you're gonna have some fear, and it's like, okay, yes sir, on it.
Yeah.
Shit.
Yep.
That makes me feel small sometimes. So I struggled really hard selling to those big corporate guys when I first started, because they would come in as that high D personality and they were very sharp, and it would shut me down. Well, when I went to Gulliver's event, I called my dad, even though I had spent all this money on a credit card. Actually, no, he called me as I'm on the tarmac getting ready to fly to Arizona. And I answered because I wanted him to, I don't know, I was seeking some validation from dad. And I wanted to tell him like, hey, like I'm on an airplane right now. We're getting ready to take off. I got to be quick. And I was just hoping he'd be like, oh, cool. Like have a good flight. Let me know where you're going.
Yeah.
He didn't do that. He said, why? And I was like, oh, well, I'm going to a sales training. And he's like, for what? He's like, they have sales training at the community college right here. And I was like, Dad, not with this guy. This guy's from Australia. Like, this is what he does. And he's like, all right, whatever. Call me back or he's like, call me when you get back. And it was like, it took all the wind out of my sails.
Yep.
So I get to Arizona and the first day is beautiful. All this training, changing my perspective. I'm taking so many notes, and there's people having breakthroughs and breaking down into tears all around me. Well, on the second day, we had dinner, and I was actually sitting next to President Barack Obama's social media manager, a really lovely lady. Like, obviously, she's successful. And she's like, "So what are you getting out of the event?" And I was like, "Honestly, like, I've gotten some great notes, but I guess I'm waiting for my breakthrough." And she was like, "Well, why'd you come?" And I was like, "I don't know. Like, I came here to learn more about sales." And and then it clicked for me. And I told her, I was like, "You know what? I came here because I want to prove something to my dad."
Hmm.
And she was like, "Why?" And I was like, "I don't know. I never questioned, why am I trying to prove something to my dad?" And I said, "I don't know." And she was like, "Well, why don't you worry about proving it to yourself first?" And I started, like, I broke down in tears right then, because I had never looked at it from the perspective of just do it for you.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, now fast forward, let's get on a sales call. So you have now a small Robert in the past who's getting beat up by these high D personalities. I'm trying to prove to them, I want acceptance from them, my dad, in order to help them. But that's not what they wanted or needed. And it's not what my dad wants or needs. My dad is proud. Like, I think my dad's proud of me regardless. He's just a jerk sometimes. It's just like, it turns out my grandfather was a prisoner of war in Austria during World War II. My dad grew up with a pretty harsh dad.
Yep.
So my dad's pretty rough and gruff. I got to experience that, but he never doubted me. He was never, there wasn't any moment where he wasn't proud of me. He just wanted me to do really, really well. And that was his way of showing it.
Yeah.
When I started trying to prove to myself, and when I started to actually implement and succeed, there was a growth where I found out who I was, and I was proud of me, and I was talented and skilled enough that it didn't matter if you were a doctor, a CEO. Look, you are on this call with me because you have some kind of a problem.
Yeah.
Now, if you had solved that problem, you wouldn't be on the phone with me. Unfortunately for you, I'm the guy who's good enough to get you to whether or not this problem's going, our solution is going to solve your problem. So if you want, we can continue the conversation, but I'm going to need you to take all of your success and all of what you've accomplished so far. I'm going to need you to put that on a shelf for a minute and let me lead this conversation. Now, that's not the words I would have used to say it, but that's the difference, where it would have been prior to, like, and I let them control me.
Yeah.
When you know who you are and you've done the work and you've actually put in the time, there's nobody who's going to take it away from you, because you did it for the right reason.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What's your thoughts? Like, have you conquered it? Like, where are you in dealing with these high Ds?
Yeah. So I'm a high D, so I don't deal with that personally as much. And also you know, on sales calls and stuff when I'll be talking with women who, like I said, are in pharmaceuticals or in, whatever. I'm just going to tell them to listen to this podcast because that was amazing. But I think that's why I love our space in our world of online marketing, because when you're the business owner, you naturally take back that control, and then you don't even have to really have this conversation because people are coming to you from a very much different frame from the beginning, and so, but I think that what you said is perfect advice, where you kind of have to detach yourself from the result, going into it and saying, hey, like, I'm here to help you, like, we're not against each other, we're on the same team, and you came to me for a reason, and do you need help or not, kind of a thing. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that's brilliant advice for anybody that feels like there's a natural, um, which it's kind of a, just a limiting belief too. Not that people aren't jerks, because I've been, one time in my life I've had somebody totally try and take the frame, and I didn't handle it well, because I was super young, and I walked out just being like, dude, you're an a-hole, like that was horrible. I hated it because I am such a strong D. I was like, who do you think you are? you know
Yeah.
but it was more like, from my perspective, the one time that did happen to me, I walked out and I was like, I don't want to work with you. I was like, this would be horrible to work with you. And luckily, again, as the business owner, rather than somebody representing a different company where I don't really get to make that choice, you're just trying to make the sale. For me, it felt really good to walk away and be like, and I sent him a rejection letter, and I was like, hey, I don't think this is the right fit. Like, this was not good, and best of luck. And guess what? That company did not find a solution because that person had, really some narcissistic tendencies that they just shut people down. And I was like, good luck with your life, and it was nice to be in that position where I was like, no, I'm rejecting you. Like, you're not rejecting me. This is
Yeah.
terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do a demonstration, like, well, my screen's blurry. I'll put it right here. So this is a pin. This happens to be my favorite pin at the moment. It's a tactical pin from Amazon. But for now, this is our power. So if I sell with conviction, in order for me to sell something with conviction, I have to have belief and certainty in that. You're familiar with all of this stuff. Like, so if I sell for somebody that I don't believe in, if I sell a product that doesn't get results, if I sell anything that's going to take away from my certainty, it's very, very difficult to overcome those sorts of conversations, at least with integrity. You can fake it, you can lie, but you're not going to feel good. Eventually, you're going to burn out. You just probably shouldn't do that for so many reasons. So again, back to defining that 30-year path and what do you want to accomplish. If I know what I want to accomplish, I know how much money I have to have, and I know that for me to have certainty is important, then I'm going to find a company that sells a product that helps people win. And I'm going to sell for somebody that I absolutely love working with. Now, when I come to a call, this is a metaphorical version of the power that I have. So I teach my sales teams, like, put a pin in your hand. Okay. And when that lead or prospect comes into the conversation, you have the power. It's right here. Hold it close and protect it. Because if you let the wrong person have your power, they might misuse it. They'll take advantage of it. They will cause, one bad apple spoils the bunch. They'll cause all kinds of problems inside of the organization. For the fulfillment team, it's potential that you end up with a bad review is the simplest version of what could go wrong. So your job as a professional is you have to have a defined sales process. It doesn't necessarily have to be a long script or anything, but you need to at least have check boxes for every call that protects your client if they're going, or rather it protects the business and the solution that you sell. So first checkbox is, do we get along? So in remote rep and the agency I built before this 1, 2, 3 enrollment, we had three check boxes, 3 laws, if you will. Rule number 1, our clients must have or provide a significant measurable return on investment. So we wanted to focus on products where if I sold somebody into this, the investment that they made and the return that came back to them, we could measure the difference. There's certain things that are difficult to measure, like life coaching, for instance. Internally, you can feel a change, but it's hard to measure on a spreadsheet. So for us, we wanted to focus mostly on stuff that were measurable and provided significant returns for the purpose of belief. That's why that rule existed. Rule number 2, we must have a 100% complete belief in the people, the product, and the process. The product can work phenomenal. I mean, it could be an amazing product, but if it's led by the wrong person, then an amazing product is not going to get a result for anyone.
Yep.
You could be like the most well-educated professor on underwater basket weaving or whatever the product may be. But if you're terrible with people, nobody's going to follow your instructions. and they're not going to get any kind of a result from that.
Yeah.
So that's where the person comes in, and then the process. So you can be the best person and you can have an amazing product, and there's no process to get somebody who's a client. If you already sold 10 different people into my product, each of those 10 people has their own history and their own background. So we need to create a process that makes sure and ensures the highest form or possibility of success for each of the people that we bring in. So that was rule number 2. Rule number 3, the reason I bring this up is we have to be able to laugh together. So if I get as early as the sales conversation, if I'm worried that we're not going to laugh together, my teams have full discretion to terminate a call.
Wow.
Full discretion. Usually they're talented enough and skilled enough, and their job is to make money selling. You don't have to worry about them just turning away everybody. But they will protect you if you give them the power to do so, and to protect themselves and to give themselves their own power. Like, you control the process. Don't let anybody bulldoze you.